Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, this budget is all about the lives, the livelihood, and the well-being of all of the people of Trinidad and Tobago. When I listened to its delivery, Madam Speaker, I thought to myself, in keeping with the government's philosophy to treating with the nation's issues, particularly as it relates to crime and violence, that it was really not only a people's budget, but it was really a crime-fighting approach made simple. I would like to thank my constituents for their support and their encouragement over the many years. I would like to thank the Prime Minister for his very stern and his very sound leadership of his government, the government that has managed the affairs of Trinidad and Tobago for the past 8-9 years. I would also like to thank the staff led by the Permanent Secretary of the Ministry of National Security, whose support would have underlay all that I would say to this House today. And of course, I thank God for our life. I thank God for the PNM, because with the member who last spoke admitting that he played devil as a boy and demonstrating in some ways that he has perfected that role, I thank God for his presence and his guidance upon us. The National Security Budgetary Allocation for 2023 to 24 is proposed at $6.9 billion out of a total of $59.2 billion. And it must be noted that education, health, and social development were allocated $8, $7, and $5 billion respectively. Given that a public health approach to violent crime focuses as well on health, some cases mental health, poverty, housing, and education, and given that we have taken a whole of government approach, these allocations yield no surprise to me, Madam Speaker. This demonstrates our cohesive understanding and coherent approach, public health approach to the safety and security of the citizens of Trinidad and Tobago. A major policy shift brought about earlier this year when the Prime Minister convened a regional meeting at the Hyatt, encouraging his counterparts from the other countries of CARICOM, and made this major policy shift, not only for Trinidad and Tobago, but for the region, taking and treating the violence that plagues us as a public health concern. We are faced, Madam Speaker, with 7 enduring threats to our safety, security, and well-being: narco-trafficking, small arms and light weapons trafficking, irregular migration, including, of course, human trafficking, terrorism, cyber attacks, climate change, and global health pandemics. We have, Madam Speaker, noted that most of these manifest themselves in the business of transnational organized crime. These organizations and networks are expansive, very well organized, and well oiled. They kill, they destroy, they extort, they bribe, they threaten even public officials, intimidate even public officials in order to have their way. National security is both multidimensional and multidirectional in nature, and our response must reflect a spirit of endurance as well, and an integrated whole of government and whole of society approach on the basis of security, our national development, and respect for human rights, as well as the advancement of a flexible and innovative environment through forging effective local and international partnerships. In this regard, these 7 enduring threats manifest a couple characteristics. One, that they are predominantly coming from outside of the borders of Trinidad and Tobago, and for that reason alone, transnational in nature. For example, narcotics, most of them that pass through here come from the South American continent. And of course, within recent times, we are seeing an increase in business synthetic drugs For example, ecstasy, ketamine, fentanyl, and hybrid marijuana coming from North America and other parts of the world. The small and light arms weapon problem is manufactured, or they are manufactured predominantly in the United States. And human beings trafficked to Trinidad and Tobago are usually from South America. And this is real. Human trafficking is real, Madam Speaker, and we are addressing that. In terms of terrorism, the one known terrorist plot that we had in 2018, that had roots outside of Trinidad and Tobago as well. The transnationality of these threats to the safety and security of our citizens, as I indicated, require organized, transnational, and tough responses. There's an inescapable convergence of narco, human, and small arms trafficking. To the extent, Madam Speaker, we are seeing these new drugs. We are told that we have about 32,000 illegal firearms around here, and human trafficking, as I said, is real. And we have noticed that the same international, transnational networks that do guns also do human trafficking and drugs. I want to apologize to the people of Trinidad and Tobago, those who have lost dear ones, those persons who are traumatized by some of our citizens and perhaps others in home invasions, in rapes, in incest. That woman who was dragged on Charlotte Street a few days ago pained all of our hearts. Madam Speaker, I, on behalf of those of us who behave in those ways, who choose crime in some cases as a business model, I apologize to the rest of us and give you the assurance that as Minister of National Security, leading national security, we will continue to put up the walls, put up the fences, and fight like hell to protect you from that. To fight this, we must operate in the spirit of international cooperation. And the government of Trinidad and Tobago has adopted simultaneous local, bilateral, and multilateral engagement. For example, in April of 2023, we hosted the symposium at the Hyatt that I just spoke about, and that involved all elements of the society, whether they be the family, the church, academia, cultural groups, sporting personalities, minority political parties like my friends on the other side, and the wider civil society are all embracing whole of government, whole of society approach. The government is committed to this approach and is quite happy that we have gotten the support of our friends and the leaders of CARICOM. There are two elements that I must lay as a backdrop to this. People are not the way they used to be. Societal morals have changed. In fact, if you are not observant, it may miss you that people are more likely or appearing to be able to hide and protect wrong and to support wrongdoing. Not everyone, but too many of our people are heading in that direction. And secondly, it appears as though, and there are those who feel, that the laws as they now stand in Trinidad and Tobago and the jurisprudence favors the criminal rather than the rest of us who are their victims. Matters for debate. So we are focused on border security in dealing with these narco, human, and small arms trafficking issues. And we completed at the ministry a border security policy, which is now ready for the consideration of the cabinet. It is hoped that this would be part of the broader management system that seeks to find a harmonious balance between trade for our economic well-being and interdiction on our ports of these illegal things that are coming in here through increased use of surveillance and inspection technologies. And therefore, Madam Speaker, the 4 new non-intrusive mobile scanners at a cost of $90 million to be acquired in 2024 are for us very critical because we need the technology to support this effort. Madam Speaker, that I am told by the Customs Division that with that and what we already have, the fixed scanners we already have, we have the capacity to search every container if we wanted to, leaving our ports. We don't do it, but we could. We have the capacity to do it. And the 16 handheld scanners also to be acquired in 2024, as announced by the Minister of Finance, will take us a long way, Madam Speaker, in improving our port security, particularly our legal ports. There's an institution known as AirCop, a multi-agency project in partnership with the UN Office of Drugs and Crime, Interpol, and the World Customs Association, and it is aimed at strengthening the capabilities that we possess at our international airports, Trinidad and, of course, Tobago, to target and intercept high-risk passengers, cargo, and mail. And the operations center for this, the nucleus for this interagency force, is already established and in operation at Piarco. CCOP, its marine version, is also up and running, and we did that in partnership with the European Union's Global Illicit Flows Program. And CCOP works with relevant agencies in Latin America, the Caribbean, and West Africa, fighting transnational crime, maritime illicit trade, and associated criminal networks. It provides for ongoing training. It is also an interagency unit. It involves customs, immigration, defense force, police, and other elements of our national security fabric. And as well, we have established the National Maritime Information System to promote information sharing with other CCOP units around the world. Madam Speaker, our Joint Maritime Control Unit and our Maritime Interdiction Unit are coordinated by our National Operations Fusion Center in conjunction with TOCU, our Transnational Organized Crime Unit. And in order to participate in phase 5, we have done 1 to 4 already. Trinidad and Tobago was required to sign an MOU between the government of Trinidad and Tobago and Expertise France. We did that. Madam Speaker, yes, the same NOFC and TOCU that the opposition leader in her very feeble and weak-kneed contribution implied that this government ignored NOFC, the Fusion Center, and TOCU. I want to give you the assurance they are up and running and serving this country very substantially over the years. And they continue to do that. The Minister of Finance told us that we will provide an additional $15 million for 10 additional TTPS riverine craft to continue their work in collaboration with the Trinidad and Tobago Coast Guard. These vessels will add to the existing stock of riverine vessels already operated by the Coast Guard and the Defense Force. And thankfully to the United States, particularly to the Ambassador, Madam Candice Bond, we received 4 by way of a donation from the United States mere weeks ago, and that has added very happily to our stock and give the assurance we will make every use of them in our rivers, in our inlets, some of which remained untouched for many, many years, as the Riverine Patrol Unit of the Police Service and the elements of the Coast Guard and the Defense Force manage our borders from the shoreline to 2 miles out. With the help of the United States, about a month ago, I went to the Coast Guard headquarters and saw the re-outfitted, upgraded command center that we always had there. And I had in my company the Admiral, his name James Aiken, who came here on USNS Burlington on its 2nd visit. I went to that vessel on both occasions. And I asked Mr. Blinken on the Mr. Aitken on the margins very quietly, what were your impressions of that upgraded command center? And he told me it was comparable to what they use in the United States. And I was more than proud about that. And therefore, it will allow us, along with our National Radar Center, it will allow the Coast Guard to see what is coming, what is happening, identify targets of interest, and to treat with them accordingly. And that, I assure you, is actually happening on an ongoing, on a daily basis. We are now engaged in a project, Madam Speaker, for the outfitting and re-outfitting and upgrade of our 12 Damen vessels. We are as well in negotiation with the UN ODC for the acquisition of a number of additional metal detectors, because as we speak, weapons in this country possessed of metal as they are hidden in some of the strangest places you could think about, Madam Speaker. Some are even buried, and metal detectors are critical in finding them to remove them from the hands of criminals and form part of the law enforcement stockpile. Drones, we are also negotiating to add some more drones to that which we already use in our management of our border and the border security operations. And air surveillance is critical to air, sea, and land interdiction strategies. Madam Speaker, let me give you a little example against the backdrop of the fact that the leader of the opposition is on public record telling this country and the world, we don't have to fight on the sea, we have to fight on the land. Well, Trinidad and Tobago is part of the Joint Interagency Task Force working along with Southcom in this hemisphere. Southcom is a U.S. military, marine and military outfit. And I get a weekly report because Trinidad and Tobago has representation on that committee. JITAF, as we call it. And this is every week. I'm just going to give you a small sample. In 1 week, beginning on the 29th of September or thereabout, on the 22nd of September 2023, there were 10 operations, leading to 7 seizures. 2 of the vessels managed to hit coastline before they were able to get them, but those vessels were flagged for future attention. 1 succeeded in delivering its dirty cargo, apparently, from the JITAF report in front of me. In those 1 week of activities, 10,514 kilograms or 10.5 tons of cocaine was seized. 5,744 pounds of marijuana, all in 1 week. So when you hear the hapless, reckless leader of the opposition talking about you don't have to fight on the sea, wait for it to come on the land, it demonstrates a level of ignorance that befuddles me. So as I said, Madam Speaker, we focus during 2024, the MNS, the National Security Ministry, is scheduled to send several of its personnel to training courses at the International Law Enforcement Academy, where I had the benefit in an earlier manifestation of attending training myself, to train in firearms interdiction, narcotics interdiction, both at sea and airports, as well as intelligence gathering and analysis. National security personnel are scheduled to participate in small arms trafficking course in November 2023. We continue to acquire equipment, in some cases on donation. For example, recently the UNODC, working along with Canada, we received visit, board, and search seizure equipment and kit from them, and we were more than grateful. I was there for the handover. The national drug policy, the early warning system of that policy was implemented. Trinidad and Tobago remains the only English-speaking Caribbean nation with membership in the UN Commission on Narcotics and Drugs. And legislative amendments are currently being drafted for the Forensics Science Center's capacity to test for precursor chemicals. The recent find of a methamphetamine factory highlights the need for this, because some of the things they found was not yet manufactured into the drug, methamphetamines. So when you get the precursor chemicals that will be put together chemically to form the drug, there are criminal offenses in relation to that too, and we are preparing legislation as I indicated in terms. We lobbied CARICOM real hard to get the CARICOM Crime and Gun Intelligence Unit to be located in Trinidad and Tobago. I'm happy to tell you we were successful, and I attended and delivered the feature address at its launch on November the 14th, 2022. Madam Speaker, intelligence-driven regional investigations and operations against gun crimes is the main purpose of that. And this is being done in collaboration with our U.S. agency partners, the ATF, Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms and Explosive Unit, the Homeland Security Investigations, the Customs and Border Protection people, the Bureau of Industry and Security, and of course the DEA. And all of those organizations, or let me say most, 99% of them, have personnel working with us on the ground here in Trinidad and Tobago. I personally, with the support of my Prime Minister and the Cabinet, lobbied hard over the last 2.5 years, the United States, to return an ATF posting personnel in Trinidad and Tobago. That too was successful, and it is taking us a long way because it is the ATF that assists us in tracing even the birthplace where these guns were manufactured, who they were distributed to in America, who they were sold to at the end of the consumer line there. And then we have a better idea when we find these illegal things in Trinidad as to its origins, and we can, with intelligence, have a better handle on things. Madam Speaker, Cabinet recently approved the regional roadmap for addressing CARICOM priority actions on the illicit proliferation of firearms and ammunition across the Caribbean in a sustainable manner by 2030. And the three main goals of that is to reinforce the regulatory frameworks governing firearms and ammunition, to reduce the illicit flow of firearms and ammunition into our borders, and to systematically decrease the risk of diversion of firearms. And when I say diversion, I mean where they leave legal and law enforcement stockpiles and end up in the hands of criminals, which have happened. You would have heard people talk about finding TTDF and TTPS ammunition on crime scenes, leaving room for all kinds of interpretations. I can't say too much about that. These matters are under police investigation, but diversion is the problem there. We are finding a lot of 7.62 ammunition on the scene. In one case recently, 94 shells were found, all of which, most of which, 5.56 and 7.62, which the military in this country no longer use. But then, diversion is the issue. We have had significant importation of that through the hands of who I consider now to be a reckless former commissioner of police, because the record shows that he allowed for the importation of more 7.62 and 5.6 ammunition than all the commissioners of police had together since our independence. And when we find them on crime scenes now, the question of diversion gets to me. And diversion also includes where they are sold or allowed to be imported legally to firearm dealers and possibly end up in the wrong hands too. But these matters are under police investigation, and therefore I don't want to say too much more about them. I can tell you, Madam Speaker, our national radar system is 100% functional, and we are now moving to discussions. CARICOM is moving to discussions with an international outfit or two to see whether we could get a regional radar system to help all of us. And I could easily see the wisdom in that, because ours benefited St. Lucia, Grenada, St. Vincent, and other countries. That's how it was set up when it was set up back then. And we had a meeting with U.S. Secretary of State Blinken. I was present. Minister Young was present. The Prime Minister was present. And heard him acknowledge the difficulty we in Trinidad and Tobago and the region is facing with U.S.-produced firearms, legally dealt with in America, but once they cross our borders, illegality sets in, and we were assured of full U.S. cooperation. And I can tell you we are gaining it in dealing with this problem, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, we are at the cusp of settling an MOU mechanism for maritime security cooperation between the Bolivian Republic of Venezuela and Trinidad and Tobago to combat human and narcotics trafficking, migrant smuggling, and other forms of transnational organized crime. And the CARICOM arrest warrant treaty not only settled, but there's a draft in the atmosphere now, thanks to the AG of Barbados and the AG in Trinidad and Tobago. They have been working along with their counterparts in the region, and we are on the cusp of settling that CARICOM arrest warrant, which will help us in finding our fugitives among our islands and no doubt elsewhere. The human trafficking and regular migration problem is in front of us, and the National Task Force was re-established on August the 21st, 2023. It's chaired by this minister, and other ministers are involved: the Attorney General, the Social Development Minister, Labour, Foreign Affairs, Education, Public Admin, also the Chief Medical Officer, and the directors and leaders of the Counter-Trafficking Unit. We follow the 3 Ps, as we call them: prevention, protection, and prosecution. In 2024, Trinidad and Tobago will no doubt experience the positive effects of the renewed strategic leadership and implementation of the TIP Act, that is the Trafficking in Persons Act, as well as our studying and dealing with the issues raised in the U.S. Department of State's TIP report, which we receive annually in this country. And I would like to thank the Attorney General, who, with the support of national security, engaged the judiciary so that the judiciary became sensitized to the need to deal with human trafficking cases, and the judiciary has stepped up to the plate, is lending support, and I'm happy to let you know, as we speak, a matter is being dealt with in the High Court before one of our judges for the business of human trafficking, especially given that one of the major challenges we face in terms of our annual reports is that there has been no prosecutions. Madam Speaker, we have, with the help of the US, appointed a strategic TIP advisor who has been working closely with the Ministry of National Security on dealing with the issues around human trafficking, particularly as it relates to the expectations of our assessors in Washington. And of course, we have already generated an effective implementation, national action plan, and a strategy for enhancing prosecutions. We have established a home for the children victims of trafficking in December of 2022 that is up and running. The Ministry of Housing, rallying to this on this whole of government thing, made 5 units which we available, which we will be using to shelter victims of trafficking. Madam Speaker, I want you to know, for the first time, we have 21 police officers, immigration officers, and Coast Guard officers and a Coast Guard officer, intelligence officer in our counter-trafficking unit. Uniformed personnel working closely inside of there to investigate and advance the business of human trafficking, which of course is a transnational crime. Our migrant registration framework set up in 2018 under the hand of the Minister of Energy today, it is still very, very effective, still up and running, still open to those who deserve the protection of the laws of Trinidad and Tobago. Very recently, we renewed the registration process for all of them, and that system is working and working reasonably well. We are now making efforts, the Minister of Education, to get the children of some of these migrant children into our formal education system, at least more of them, because some were already in there from information available to me, and I'm very, very proud of that. That would have come after some collaboration with the Archbishop of Port of Spain, and I want to encourage Madam Minister that we continue to do this. And we are heading towards full compliance in terms of our ranking, in terms of our assessors from Tier 2 watch lists. We are expecting very, very good things in 2024, all things considered. The cost of policing our communities, Madam Speaker, the cost of incarceration, $25,000 per inmate per month, the cost of rehabilitation, the cost of unproductivity when we lose able-bodied young men and women to drugs and to nothingness, the cost of familial breakdowns, the cost of the fear and the trauma that we experience, all of these are far more expensive than the cost of our offshore border interdiction, to put a lie to what the member of the leader of the opposition, as I referenced, had earlier said.
Member, I believe you used the word that I
oblige. I withdraw that word. Sorry. I oblige, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service is the major element of our fight against the threats to our security. They have a complement of near 10,000 men and women, 7,500 regular police officers, and 2,005 special reserve police officers. And they are guided by a comprehensive current operational and strategic plan, both of which I have and live with and work with and hold them accountable on. Insofar as patrols are concerned, for 2022, the police reported some 345,000 patrols across their 10 divisions. To date in 2023, 8,873 patrols, establishing presence. And even so, I hear cries from the public for even greater presence, and those cries are justified. And therefore, we have to continuously reshape, redouble our efforts, redeploy to meet public expectations, because things are happening at a rate that is troubling. The IATF, the Interagency Task Force, which consists of soldiers and Coast Guard men and women, they done during the course of the last year 30,000, year to date, last year, 30,951 patrols. So when I hear people saying, Mr. Hinds, you should bring soldiers in the atmosphere, I say quietly to myself, they're already there. I heard a businessman calling a couple of days ago for soldiers to be on job sites. I can give him the assurance soldiers are already out there supporting the police service in those and in other ways. Some say the solution to our problems is more guns and more ammunition, following the philosophy wrongly adopted by that last commissioner that I spoke about. This government is more focused on the restrictive policy, where firearms are going to be granted to people who can demonstrate that they need them, and not simply because you're somebody's friend, or not simply because somebody could make you happy. And some people feel the formula to this is stand your ground and shoot back, and knock it and matic and all of that. If the law enforcement of this country take that bad advice, you know what chaos we would have? So I want to reject that. We believe if we strengthen and professionalize the police service and tool them with intelligence and come together as a parliament and pass the right laws to support law enforcement, we could fight that without the madness of matic and shoot up and lick up and clip it and all kind of foolishness. But again, I don't want to talk too much about that. Suffice it to say that a distinguished former retired justice of appeal described all that happened there with the legal firearm regime as a well-oiled criminal enterprise. And I wouldn't go further. I'll just confine myself to that description because I know that these matters are gaining the firm investigative attention of the police service. We are engaged in a serious national gun retrieval exercise because all the murders you hear, my friends on the other side, and everybody justifiably talking about, and the trauma that it yields in the society, they are done with guns, 87–90% of them across the region and in Trinidad and Tobago. So we believe that if we put a national gun retrieval exercise, which we have done, in place, it is led by an assistant commissioner of police, hard-working, professional, and in conjunction with a major of the defense force. They are leading this charge to taking these illegal guns back into our care and dismantling them. Last year, we began a process of dismantling 7,000 of them to avoid the diversion of which I spoke, from legal stockpiles to others. And we call on the public, as I heard the commissioner do up to yesterday, if you can help yourself by identifying the presence of these lethal items, please do so, because the life you save may just be your own. Revolvers, pistols, shotguns, submachine guns, rifle, homemade shotgun, and even hand grenades have been found here. 96 revolvers recovered so far for the year, 298 pistols, 35 shotguns, 11 submachine guns, 62 rifles using 5.56 or 7.62, 18 homemade shotguns, altogether 521 firearms recovered by the police so far for the year. I would like to see that figure quadrupled, quintupled. And the more guns we get, the more the public support the police in getting these guns out of the hands of criminals, the less likelihood we'll have to cry every Monday morning as we gather outside the Forensic Science Center. And I have to account for these murders as Minister of National Security. I want the public support. And I want the support of my friends on the other side for us to gang up, if I may say so, in a civilized, wonderful, legislative way and fight the criminals, the minority in this country, who are putting stresses upon us. As for murder figures, it's guns and bullets that causing the murders. In 2022, among the 10 divisions in the police service, 4 2022, 605 murders we had, right? For 2023, year to date, we've had 458 as at when I received these figures here between January the 1st and October the 9th. 458. 63 detected. So we're running close to what happened in 2022, unfortunately. The total number of murders solved in 2023 so far is 85. 63 of them, as I just said, committed in 2023. 22 in previous years combined. And 90 persons have been charged for murder in 2023. We've seen, in addition to the murders, so far for the year to date, 572 woundings and shootings with the use of firearms, of course, for the most part. And if every one of that 572 was a fatal blow or bullet or shot, you could imagine what we would have been dealing with in this country. We've seen an increase between 2022 and 2023 in rapes and incest and other sexual offenses. We have seen an increase in fraud offenses. Right now, I'm aware of one being investigated by the police in a certain government department, among others. So what we saw in 2021, 2022, 10,180 serious crimes. And so far in 2023, 9,412, a reduction so far statistically of something like 8%, 768 crimes, serious crimes less, or 8%. Thereabout. So, Madam Speaker, the police are very busy out there with some targeted operations. The number of them so far for the year is 225. Warrants executed 196. Firearms found 124 so far in the period that we're talking about. Summary of the operation between August and the 9th of October. Marijuana and cocaine found, firearms found, money seized. So I'm satisfied from that as Minister. The police are out there doing what they are supposed to do. I am so happy to know that we will now be supporting the Commissioner's effort to increase her annual recruitment from 300 to 1,000 recruits, Madam Speaker. Insofar as the roads are concerned, all the police will tell you, especially through the active directed patrols, the road is the place to control because you find this used there. Only recently, there was a murder in Sawa. And the police transit unit saw a man break a traffic light down in the Pittsburgh area, intercepted that vehicle because of the traffic offense. And it turns out that that vehicle had something to do with the murder up the road or down the road. So it shows, it proves, control the roads, you could make a lot of indeed. The CCTV cameras, which my friends are always happy to ask about, well, we are well inside of that. Some of the cameras are already up. 5 areas in the Port of Spain division will have them by the bottom of this week. And from the 16th of this month, October, we'll be installing them because the infrastructure, the backbone, the NEMA boxes, all of these have been done. And from the 16th of this month, Madam Speaker, cameras will be installed at about 75 of them per day across the place, and we will get the benefit of them going forward, Madam Speaker. I have in the Parliament an integrity testing bill. When the Prime Minister spoke about vetted units, my friends on the other side howled. Well, we've had vetted units here for a very, very long time. And so we go. In my effort to oversee the professionalization of the police and other units, I can tell you the Trinidad and Tobago Defense Force had year-to-date 438 officers participate in various training programs, locally, regionally, and internationally. For the police service, 8,383 of them. And all of the staff of the probation services, all of the fire service, 338 persons trained. Prison service, 751. Different kinds of training. Immigration, 98 of them. National Drug Council, 65 training opportunities. And training, therefore, is it. There's an old military saying, training, training, training. The more you train in war, the less you bleed. In peace, the less you bleed in war. And I like that. It tells the story. This is not about pelting money, as the leader of the opposition said on the day after the budget. This is not about pelting money. This is about training our officers to professionalize them, giving them the tools that they need in order to be able to respond to the challenges that we face. And a lot is happening at the police academy, and there's a lot of close work taking place between the TTPS and the Forensic Science Center. You heard, Madam Speaker, that they just solved the Guanapo murders and charged 2 persons for it. That was work, scientific work, starting with CERU, which is the Specialist Evidence Recovery Unit of the Police Service. I visited them, and I see what they do. Worthwhile investment. And then they would send the thing to the Forensic Science Center for further analysis. All I could tell you without saying too much is that the Guanapo situation was as a result of nice collaboration between different elements of the police service and the use of the science. So we are doing things and we are getting there. We have improved the ballistic capacity of the Trinidad and Tobago Forensic Science Center. There was a time when only the casings could have given them help. Now even the projectiles, the part that leaves the bullet and goes to its target, that too is of help scientifically, and we have done that in the year 2023. And I think the Forensic Science Center must be complimented for this, and all overseen by, of course, the Ministry of National Security. Close collaboration, and I am satisfied that the police are solving more murders. But because of the rate of these murders, it is not so easily evident, because we're getting more and more murders. This is why the gun retrieval and the ammunition retrieval programs and the border security issues of which I spoke are so critical and important. All of them managed by our National Operations Fusion Center and the National Intelligence Fusion Center as well. Insofar as the TTDF is concerned, the Defense Force have already said that they are already out there with us. They recruited and enlisted in 2022 227 persons, graduated 212. So far in 2023, 201 persons have been enlisted, recruited, and their training is ongoing. As for officer ranks, commission ranks, 15 persons. As for patrols, the Defense Force is reporting 10,000 patrols between January the 1st and the 30th of September. And I'm hearing one of the persons on the other side asking, where's the result? Well, it is hard to measure the preventative aspect of law enforcement, unless if he could. But I could tell you, without these, the situation would have been, from a logical point of view, far more dire. And I want to encourage them rather than act stupidness, Madam Speaker. I want to encourage them. We are working on a returnees bill to facilitate the vision of the government to return terrorist fighters from conflict zones and other persons who may not have been fighters, but progeny of and associated with those persons. The government appointed recently a 3-man team with Nizam Mohammed and a couple other persons to assist the government, assist Project Nightingale, and we are doing that. We have already identified an assessment center. When they, in accordance with the returnees bill, return, they'll be assessed and so on, and then, well, of course, we'll take it from there. And Madam Speaker, in terms of cybersecurity, you know of the attacks that we've been having. We are training our personnel. I have records here to demonstrate the extent of the training. I'm willing to make it to my friends on the other side, but time is running hard, so I'm going to deal with this. Madam Speaker, the budgetary measure announced a few days ago by the Minister of Finance to give tax relief to businesses that would invest up to $500,000 on measures to improve their cybersecurity software is a powerful and a good thing. Because as the nation becomes more digitized, even the government, through the Ministry of Digital Transformation, we need to put up defenses because cybercrime is real and it is burgeoning, and all the training and all the support that we can do. It is in this public health approach, it is like an individual deciding, I will wear a mask. I'll buy my own sanitizer. So the Minister of Finance will give financial consideration, tax consideration, to those who invest in protecting all of us in this public health approach that we are taking. All of us have a role to play. Insofar as the fire service is concerned, I can tell you, Madam Speaker, the fire service is very busy, busier than the public would understand. In 2021, it responded to 555 residential fires. In 2022, 537. And so far for this year, 454. Non-residential fires for this year so far, 84. Bush fires alone, which you see destroying large chunks of Canada, Australia, New Zealand, 2,439 bushfires. I was at a fire in Laventille where unfortunately one of my constituents, wheelchair-bound, perished in a little small wooden place. But when the fire officers got there, they got there from a bushfire that they told me that they had just been dealing with. And therefore...
Honourable Member for Laventille West, your original speaking time is now spent. You have 10 more minutes to complete your presentation.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker.
You may proceed.
Madam Speaker, you hear a lot about breathing apparatus. I'm now able to tell you all fire stations are outfitted with breathing apparatus. And we have even imported a breathing apparatus trailer to carry them around. And we are confident that we can, while we procure even more, respond to our fire service office personnel who would need them to go in there and fight fires. We have just acquired two water rescue vessels. We have these party boats up and down the place every night, and you wonder sometimes what will happen if something breaks out there. Well, the fire service has prepared itself to be able to treat with them with 2 water rescue vessels, Madam Speaker. And we have just commissioned as well a mobile water system which will allow us to draw water apart from what the tenders will bring. This system will allow us to draw water from any open source, rivers, the sea, people's swimming pools, wherever there's a source of water. So I know that it is getting better and better as we go along. Madam Speaker, search and rescue issues, you've been hearing a little bit about that. The fire service is involved in all of them search and rescue issues. And again, I know when we hear stories, sometimes the fire service don't get the credit that it should, but I have spoken to the leadership of the fire service to improve its public relations or its communication bit in order that we can get those things sorted out. We understand even climate change and its direct impact on food security, water security, energy security, and the like. Because we understand an absence of these securities or a break in these could lead to social disruption and disorder. So we keep a good eye on those things from national security as well. And in 2024, we expect to see some serious headway in terms of Madam Speaker, our approaches in disaster management. We have created, in this whole of government approach, the Ministry of Youth Development. We have the GRACE program operating out of national security. We have the IATF's Hearts and Minds. We have all the community police groups. We have the youth groups, prison service, TTDF doing my lot and my part. About 3 weeks ago, I sat in the grandstand of the Savannah and saw a young man who graduated from the MyLat program. He was a young man at risk, exposed to guns and drugs and everything else like so many others, unfortunately. He, in 2 years at the hands of those soldiers in the MyLat program, came out of there with 6 passes, 4 1s and 2 2s. An outstanding example of why we understand we have to deal firmly with the criminals who use crime as a business model, who feel they could go and take what contractors have and bully their way into people's houses when the night come in so-called home invasions. We have to deal with them, and we are dealing with them. But at the same time, we create pathways for our young people. So many, and Minister Cummings, Minister of Youth Development and National Service would have spoken about that. So we focus, Madam Speaker, on professionalizing and improving the technology of our crime-fighting platforms. We are confident, and we want the criminals to know that we are getting stronger and we are getting better, and we are coming to get you. That's what we want them to know. And to the public, I say in metaphor, if you want to live in a litter-free country, you can't be littering yourself. And if you see someone littering, you got to speak to them. And sometimes when you see litter, you need to pick it up sometimes in terms of your own civilized contribution to things. And that was my metaphor, meaning that if you tell us, help us clean up the litter of firearms and ammunition and the molly and the drugs and the filth that is around your children, you will be doing yourself, your community, and the country a great service. It is the intention of the Minister of National Security in this public health approach, borrowing from the Minister of Health and the Prime Minister, to go more frequently after this budget to the public and keep them updated, as the Minister of Health did, on a very regular basis about what we are doing, what are the outcomes, how we will do it in order to protect them, and of course to tell them what you can do to assist yourself in this regard. Madam Speaker, I am very sanguine, I'm very confident that the police service, the defense force, the law enforcement family is on the move to push back against the criminals as the people of Trinidad and Tobago deserve and expect. Madam Speaker, I thank you.